Hi, I'm Danny Pond and this is my fourth video. Instead of complaining about something like I did the past 2 weeks, I've decided instead that I'm going to show off my first game called Spiderbro and sort of explain how that game came about and why it was made and what inspired what and why I think it's awful. But you should still play it, even though it's not the best game, but you should still play it. It's kind of cool. Of course, feel free to tell me how much you like or dislike the game in the comments. I'm open to all feedback. But the story begins in 2018. I start making a game engine. I decide I really want to make a game. I have this vision for a game. So I start making this game engine, and the reason I didn't use an already existing engine was because the only computer I had at the time was this awful Toshiba satellite thing. It was like single core, I swear to God. Maybe it was dual core. It had only a gig of RAM. It was really, really bad, and on Windows 7 it just ground to a halt. So I had to run, I think it was like an old version of Linux on it that had run, because even a lot of newer versions struggled to run on that thing. It was like it was allergic to every operating system I put on it. Either there was a lack of drivers, or the drivers were there but it performed like absolute crap. So instead of using something or learning to use something like Unity or Unreal or anything like that, I've decided I'll write my own engine. I'll make it very minimalistic and focused on the sort of games I want to do, which is sort of adventure puzzle sort of stuff. At some point in 2019, my life changes quite a bit, and I end up moving to Leeds and living with Xander, who's currently my sound guy. Whilst this is happening, I'm still working on the engine, maybe slightly less so. You can see, if you take a look at the patch notes, you can definitely see a slowdown during that time, but I'm still ultimately working on it. Xander and I decide that we'd like a laptop, and we decide that we're going to get a MacBook, and we go halves on it, and now I have a computer upgrade. Despite making the engine very lightweight, I was having issues compiling. 1 gig of RAM just really wasn't cutting it. Also, I needed to be able to compile for Windows platforms, and also I wanted to support macOS at the time, so it ended up being that this MacBook was an absolute godsend, and I was able to develop a lot of the engine on, I think it's a 2016 MacBook. And then Xander was also able to use the Mac for his DJing stuff, which was a focus for him at the time. At some point, I start planning a game. I'm not telling you what it's called, it's actually still in development. But at the time, I fully intended for it to be my first game. I didn't recognise that it was way too big of an ambition for the time. However, later on I do realise this. Ultimately, the thing that changed everything was the pandemic. All the way through the summer of 2019, I'd been hanging around with a lot of Xander's friends who are all lovely, but not that into video games. Their outlets are drag and stuff like that, and that's lovely. I love that stuff. It's all incredible. But ultimately, it's not for me, and games weren't for them, and they certainly weren't interested in helping me develop video games. So I start trying to look for people who would want to help me bring this vision alive. Then all of a sudden COVID-19 happens, and we're all isolated and forced to stay in our homes. Rightly so, considering this disease could kill us all. But at the time, it was easy to be annoyed, because it was like, God damn it, I was just ready to go out and find the people to help me bring this vision alive, and now I cannot do it, and I'm stuck at home with all this free time because I can't work, and I'm unable to do the game that I want to make. After about a month of not that much happening, I think in April, I come to the decision of this isn't going to end anytime soon. And if it does end anytime soon, it'll be likely because we're all dead. So I think, I've got all this free time. I should just make a small free-to-play video game with the sole purpose of it really is to test my engine, to make sure that the thing doesn't crash on people's computers. I'd had trouble getting testers at the time to test my engine. I still have trouble getting testers today. It is the eternal struggle of an indie developer, is getting people to test your games. My friends, God bless them, they must be so annoyed with me. And it's from those circumstances that Spiderbro arises, because I look very carefully at my strengths and weaknesses at the time and decide what can I do, essentially. What am I capable of doing? Because I don't want to go beyond scope. I don't want to make something that's going to take me forever to make. And I don't want to make something that's considered an embarrassment, although I appreciate it if you don't think the game's very good. I just hope it's not an embarrassment. And that is ultimately where the visual design comes from, because I can't art, and after making a bunch of test assets and trying to make games previously before I'd written this engine, and all my previous failed attempts from my childhood to make video games, I had come to learn that I cannot art at all. So the idea was, let's make this low resolution and super simplistic, so it kind of looks like a ZX Spectrum game. The resolution I ended up using was the resolution for the Game Boy, and Spiderbro 2 is going to be the same, but I've upped my creativity in the artwork somewhat. Hopefully it's not an embarrassment. Also, ultimately what I found good about making the game was it was an excellent exercise in learning how to use my own engine, and that probably sounds nuts, but when writing your own code, it's very easy to overlook things. You may think, oh, this is a simple engine, it does this very specific type of game, and you'd be right. But there's a lot to think about, a lot more than you would think, and a lot more than I thought. And it was good of me to be able to try this smaller game out, a very different style game from what Game 3 is going to be. So it ended up working out really good in that I was able to add features and cool stuff to my engine in preparation for the better games. It would also allow me to discover the process of getting games on digital platforms and allow sort of a trial run of figuring all that out and the potential pitfalls and what's required, so I can then, when I've got a paid product, I know what I'm doing from the get-go, I understand the process, and I can just get it done quick. So here we are in the game. This is the main menu. Exciting, I know. So let's begin. So, why the spider? Why did I try to make a spider? I think spiders are cool, so and I don't think there's that much spider love in video games or in the world in general, so I thought spiders can be cute, why not? Also, the little guy was really easy to draw. So let's go over here. So this is the bit that pretty much establishes the plot, which is incredibly simple. It isn't really much of a plot. The plot being I copied Prince of Persia, essentially. And pretty much every game that has like a dark version of yourself, the idea here being that you've got this shadow spider that came out of this mirror when you leapt through it, and there's a level in Prince of Persia which is pretty much exactly like this. You jump through a mirror, and then you get this shadow guy sort of like stalking you. Instead of just making it one level, I made it the entire game. This is just a simple key puzzle. So one thing I decided to do with this game was make it quite easy. I think it might be in that horrible position where it's a little too hard in places for beginners of adventure puzzle games, but for the veterans this is almost an insult until maybe the last puzzle. So for that reason I took the inventory totally out of the game to make it super easy. If you've got the key and you're at the right door, you'll use the key automatically. For the rest of the games that probably won't be the case, and you'll have to deal with an inventory and specifically choose which inventory item you want to use on which object. So as you can see, I used the idea of having this shadowy clone as a way just to string puzzles together. It's a very easy way to just, have an enemy that you understand. You don't have to explain anything using words or anything, so it just felt visually very simple to understand that this guy's going to get in your way and it's up to you to overcome that. The controls are kind of weird, and in Spiderbro 2 that has improved. There's a lot more options in terms of how you control the game. Cool, so the idea of having little PCs and terminals and like an operating system you can use in my games was pretty much directly inspired from a game called Beneath a Steel Sky. I don't know if you've played that game, but there's these things called link terminals in them, and you can essentially put in, I think it's like an ID card you put in them, and you can browse the computer. I thought that as a kid was insanely cool, and as an adult I still think it's insanely cool. So yeah, that functionality made it into my engine, and I've made a lot of use of it in Spiderbro and Spiderbro 2. There'll be a pulling back of this mechanic, I think, for game 3, simply because I have used it a hell of a lot in these two games, and also game 3 is already planned, as I mentioned earlier, and yeah, there isn't that many PCs in that game. One thing I do think is possibly annoying is the way that the inventory is accessed in this game, and especially the fact that you are kicked out of the PC every time. Now this used to be further frustrated by the fact that the purple spider guy, Spiderbro, used to talk every time you used the PC. He'd be like, "I've put the floppy disk in." I changed that eventually, and it took me a long time to change. I was always concerned that the player would never know what was going on because of the simplicity of the graphics. So for that reason, I believe I overcompensated somewhat and treated the player probably like an idiot, having the spider guy explain literally every time you go on a PC, "I've plugged the floppy disk in." It's not necessary ultimately. So eventually, in a recent update, we took that entirely out, and the game's a lot quicker and a lot snappier as a result, and I think you can just get through the levels and everything much quicker. So I'll lower the bridge. I remember when I was starting to make this as well, I was like, wow, I never expected to be using my like animation stuff and having this sort of like, I know it seems very simple, a bridge just lowered, but this seemed like crazy stuff at the time, for me at least. It's like, wow, I can string all these animations together. Oh my god, look at that. That's awful. Ugh. Okay, another key. Oh yes, of course. So these little things were just sort of like, I don't know what inspired them. I knew how I had to build up some sort of mystery behind where the shadow guy comes from, and I always had this idea that halfway through the game you enter the shadow world and face a bunch of puzzles in there, and those puzzles are quite a bit different. So I wanted to build up some kind of mystery in all of that. What the mystery is exactly, you'll have to find out in Spiderbro 2, because in the making of this I decided just to leave it totally open-ended, which may not have been a good choice, because I think some people finished the game disappointed that very little was explained and there's very little context for anything that's going on here. Okay, moving on to level 3. So yeah, I remember this bit taking a while, getting the bomb to explode well. I'm terrible at art and just because of the linearity, because of how linear it is, and it's going to require a lot more animations than my third game will, simply because that one's a lot more exploratory. I can't talk, forget it. Either way, this is where the game takes a bit of a downhill sort of. I think a lot of people dip out in level 3 and get quite bored, and I don't blame them. In fact, I should really rip level 3 totally out of this game, and I had sort of an idea at the time that I knew it'd be annoying and it'd put people off. The first thing to mention is that you don't know that you can interact with this. A lot of people don't realise that, and what's a gap that I can go through and what's a gap that isn't, we don't know. There's no way to tell between those things. So it's kind of sloppy in terms of design. Also, as you'll see, I introduced a mechanic which was possibly quite frustrating, and I realised that by the further levels and kind of like wanted to ditch it. So I'll get one of the keys here. I think is it the pink key we can get? Cool. And we can also get the web. The terminal kicking you out every time you run something, that is totally gone in Spiderbro 2, thankfully. We don't waste your time like that anymore. You just jump right back into the PC once you've done what you're doing. You don't have to select it again. What's in here? No CPU, huh? So even though there's like little reason for these like notes to be here and you've just got to sort of guess, that is explained in Spiderbro 2, and there is a story behind all of that. Did we get the web? already have the web, cool. So the mechanic I was talking about earlier that I introduced was the web. Now, again, this was another thing that the little guy used to talk about every time you activated this, so now it's better than it was. It's a lot faster. You don't have to go through dialogue anymore. But the mechanic is somewhat cumbersome, and ultimately just it does nothing. it does very little, at least. Ultimately, I thought it'd be cool because it's kind of easy to animate, but even then, it was boring. This is also the first puzzle to introduce some element of backtracking into the game, which I think throws a lot of people. I think it isn't fully... I don't think it's fully clear to the player where levels begin and levels end, so for some people only being able to backtrack so far is confusing, and they're not entirely sure where the levels begin or end. If the shadow spider gives you a new puzzle, that's usually the sign of a new level. However, not always, because sometimes you don't see the shadow spider for a little while. What we're gonna do is... oh, blue door. One more frustrating thing about this game, or at least the version of the engine here, because this is another thing that's fixed in Spiderbro 2, is you cannot skip dialogue text or speed up the animation of it sort of typing out. There's no way to sort of bypass that and just go straight to the end like there is in other games. So in this puzzle, you're essentially unlocking the computer. The reason I didn't use the computer in the blue room, behind the blue door, is because it's locked down with an application lock. We've just switched that off on this PC. I don't know whether people picked up on this, but you can sort of see what's going on here. Because if you get a description of the network, as you see, and it'll say one client PC linked, and if you go to the one behind the blue door, which we'll go in a second, it says one admin PC linked. So that's sort of a clue as to these PCs are linked and one of them controls the permissions of another. So there we are, one admin PC linked, and that's sort of a clue that you weren't able to use the apps on this PC until you turned off the app lock. Oh, I think my cat wants to get in. I'll be right back. But we've got the chisel now, that's cool. Okay, so we're done backtracking here. We can head forward. Yeah, this is long, and it was even longer before. This level, unfortunately, definitely kills the game for a lot of people. What's up? So this is our first teaser into the grey world. I wanted just a little hint of it, at least more than the cracks that you see on the walls and stuff. Don't ask me why the purple key's here. Things fall through the cracks, I guess. That's sort of like the narrative I'm running with in Spiderbro 2 at least. Okay, on to level 4. That is very Prince of Persia. That is incredibly Prince of Persia, that. So yeah, this is why I start to realise that the web mechanic sucks. So I use it one tiny little bit, one tiny time, just to be like, yes, this is part of the game. It definitely wasn't a mistake putting that in. The first version, nearly the first version of everything went in. I didn't really go back and change stuff all that much. I think I changed the you get a little animation showing arrows at the very beginning to demonstrate that you use the arrow keys to move the guy. I think I also showed a space bar before you use the mirror. So just little tutorials like that were the only real additions post sort of like development. Very little of it I went back and iterated on, which is something that I definitely do now for sure. But hey, I thought the world was gonna die maybe, so you know, maybe I can be forgiven for rushing my game a little bit in a pandemic. Okay, we need to switch off the app lock again, this puzzle again. I think we've got everything from in there. Cool, we've got bottled water. I'm not sure if there's anything relevant on this PC. No, just the Polybius game. I'm not going to play that. I'm scared the camera software will screw up or something. I don't know, but it's essentially an extra bonus mini-game. It's an arcade-style sort of shooter game that I included. This originally was actually a zombie game in the first versions of Spiderbro, but I changed it for Polybius because it's better, and also it links into the story of Spiderbro 2, so the change is good and for the benefit of the lore, and it's a much better game anyway than the zombie one, which was downright broken at times. So we won't bother with Polybius today. I'll let you guys play that one. What key was it that we got? Was it the blue key we got? Yes. So I think this bit threw people up. I don't think they realised that they still possessed an empty water bottle. I'm not sure if does one of the terminals have an inventory application you can see there, but that entails going back to the terminal. Who's going to be bothered doing that? So I think a lot of people just sort of guessed you had to do this and was just kind of like, whoa, okay. What does this say? Oof. I guess no one's been emptying trash. So I think in here we can finally get the green key. Awesome. And this is where the game becomes interesting about halfway through. the earlier levels are kind of mid. I was very just doing very basic baby steps of trying to add to the puzzle. So it's like, okay, it's a key puzzle, and then it's a key puzzle, but you've got to raise a bridge and use a terminal, and then you've got to use different items and stuff like that. But at least in the purple world, they all revolve around essentially being key puzzles. I am going to save the game. I don't think I've saved yet. I don't know if you can hear the soundtrack. It was Xander who did the soundtrack. I convinced him to help me out on this because, well, he's good at music. He's better than me anyway. So I managed to convince him that this was something worthwhile. So it was kind of like towards the end of the pandemic, he began working on the music. We were still sharing a laptop at the time. In fact, we were sharing a laptop right up until release, which was quite frustrating actually, because I was trying to add stuff to the game, quite meaningful stuff actually. I rewrote whole parts of the engine like days before release. I changed the whole way that collision and some values worked, and I added a whole bunch of arrays, and it reduced a lot of code, but it was a lot of work, whilst also Xander was also doing a lot of work on the same computer doing sounds. So fortunately I was able to acquire a ThinkPad, one that I've still got today. It's awesome. I love that thing. But yeah, Xander's music, I think it's pretty cool. I told him just to go wild and weird because the game is weird, and I thought that'd really suit the game, and he really created this sort of really oppressive tone, which the game has throughout. That might be a result of sort of how dark my moods were during the pandemic, and you know where I was mentally, and I'm sure where a lot of people were mentally. So we've got a robot here. Oh yeah. So yeah, it's sound effects as well. Really cool. Really cool. That computer booting, the robot booting. I love that sound. Sorry if I talked over it. I can't actually hear them. So yeah, this is the introduction to robots, and it took a while to even show that my engine was capable of NPCs. Yeah, a lot of people say you should, show off everything you could possibly do in like the first room and make it look amazing. And there is something to be said about that. There's something to be said about wowing someone from the start. With this, I really wanted sort of a slow burn, sort of gradual, like, oh, I don't think this game has any surprise for me, and then maybe some surprise when things start changing and stuff like that, and oh wow, it's got robots in now. I just wanted to gradually bring the elements in. It also made sense to me as from a development point of view, with it being my first game I was developing on this engine. It was just good to start simple and slowly get more and more complex. But I'm sure there's some people who have played the game who don't even realise it has robots in it. Maybe they probably didn't get this far, most people. I'll pick up this lubricant. So yeah, this is another admin lock puzzle. Almost sort of a bait and switch on the idea actually, because as you'll see later on, what you actually end up having to do is lock the admin lock, get it back to be locked. Otherwise you can't progress. This is also the introduction to, instead of using keys to open doors, but using robots, getting the permissions or getting the level set up in a way that you're able to request that the robot come open the door up. I think this mechanic also confused a lot of people. I don't think people realised that you couldn't open the doors. A lot of people had like wandered right up and be like, "What? Why can't I use this button? Why is it only robots?" What, you know? I think that frustrated a lot of people for sure. Again, this is something that's been fixed in the sequel. If you go up to one of those doors now, it tells you can't open it. And that's because this here, the little red thing, it's not intended to be a switch like a lot of people think. It's actually a bulb. There's actually no physical way to open those doors, but a lot of people mistake the bulb as a switch, which, yeah, my fault. As the creator of all this horrible art, it's my fault, absolutely. So we lubricated the robot and we got it to open the next door for us. Look at that though. I'm seeing a lot of like stuff that I would do differently now. I think for sure. But yeah, the puzzle here is now to backtrack again. This robot won't do what you want it to. It'll just kind of it'll declare its freedom. And if we use that terminal, it'll just be like, "Oh, sorry, we can't do anything." Again, this is something that a lot of people got tripped up on. With that said, I feel like, I don't know, from a game developer's perspective, it always felt like to me like, well, is it not inevitable that at some point I'm going to need you to not just unlock it but also lock it for various purposes, because the ability's there. It was all about taking what existed and just adding a further notch in the complexity of it. I think I've gotten a lot better at that. This was clearly a case where it didn't work out for most people. Okay, we can get out of here now. Another annoying thing about this game is that you cannot skip cutscenes, which now you can do in Spiderbro 2, but yeah, in this one there's no skipping of the cutscenes whatsoever. I think this especially makes it frustrating for the end puzzle, because there can be a lot of trial and error with that one, and this is where the people who are new to adventure puzzle games would be like, what on earth is going on in that last puzzle? Don't get it. The shadow spiders returned and closed the door on us. So level 6, things start getting kind of, I don't want to say big because it's not that big, but kind of big. We've got a fairly biggish room to explore here with multiple items. don't think we can go back on ourselves. But we've got a hole to go through here. And we also have another room up here. First, I think we need to go on the terminal. It's the purple key we need from this. A lot of people became pretty stuck trying to get a bottle from this box. And yeah, this this is just kind of like one of them where it it's not obvious, but you'll eventually sort of do it by accident anyway. I think. See, yeah, this bit possibly a little bit too long, especially for those who attempted to steal bottles several times and maybe decided, oh, is it like only certain places I have to go, or maybe the puzzle's in like making sure the robot's off the screen. They didn't realise that the robot will get them every time no matter what, at least until you've done a very specific thing. And I think that whole interaction's just a little too long. So here's a fun fact about this map. I don't know whether it's fun or not, it's a little bit morbid, but there's a musician called Sophie, or there was a musician called Sophie. She unfortunately died, and I heard the news whilst I was making this map. For some reason that has stuck in my mind, but check out her music, she's awesome. So as you can see, this level's a little bigger than you'd expect. There's a whole purple bit. This PC is completely useless. It's literally there for decoration. Anything on that is just a waste of time, really. And you can see we're actually at the opposite end of level 4. Again, things I'd do differently. As you can see, there's a bit of a graphical error going on up there. The edge of the map is just way too close to the screen. It's just... So we'll see in a bit where that goes. Just collect the battery here. So this is where I'm like, I need to get rid of the fucking web. I hate that mechanic. I never want to use it again, even though I ended up using it again. So I was just thinking, what's a good way to get rid of the web? And I came to the conclusion that, oh, if he has like a broken lift, he won't want to jump down, completely ignoring the fact that he's just jumped down a massive like tunnel like to get into the grey world and didn't sustain any fall damage. But all of a sudden now it's a lift shaft. He's suddenly concerned about it and decides to use the web. So I didn't really think that through all that well, to be honest with you. And to hell with the web mechanic. So yeah, that's what confuses the robots eventually. A rope falls down and its pathfinding gets confused. That's the idea there. So now we're able just to take a bottle. So yeah, this is essentially another robots battery puzzle, plus with the added lube puzzle of the 5th level. God, this purple fox talks too much. How did I tolerate testing this? So now we should be able to plug the battery into the robot. And then we can get the lube from this barrel here. So yeah, as you can see, I was attempting to take very simple puzzles and just build on top of them and be like, okay, the robot opens the door, but now this robot needs some lube. Okay, now this robot needs a battery. Okay, now this robot needs both. Awesome, so I believe we're ready to request the door be opened, which is excellent. I think possibly another reason why this game confused people is because, again, it's a very simple basic game for those well acquainted with adventure puzzle games, but at the same time it assumes you know a lot about computers. You know, you've got some very like low techy sort of very low level system stuff going on here. You've got these little terminals and stuff, and they all do different things, but you know, you don't have the long file names of Windows 95, for example. You know, it's all very, it seems almost MS-DOS days, even if it is graphical. It's what is savegame.h, you know, people might not realise that, and people might not realise that requestaccess.h, even though they may have pressed it a few times already, they may not realise that that's the thing that gets the robots to open the door. So, yeah, I think I was just taken for granted a little bit on how knowledgeable people are with computers, the average person at least. When I made a game that was meant to be for the average person. Spiderbro 2, I go into the camp of this is a much harder game, even though I still have like there's built-in systems for the not so experienced players to get help and to get clues. So I think that's a better way of doing it, rather than just going, hey, simplicity, but oh, by the way, I'll be using like weird computing analogies that you won't understand. And now I've got the weird computing analogies and the hard puzzles. It'll alienate everybody. Okay, so this puzzle that's coming up, I believe that the clue of it is this file here. I don't know whether many people picked up on that. I get the feeling that a lot of people solved that puzzle. Oh, yeah, yes. I get a feeling that a lot of people solved that puzzle sort of in a different way, which is totally valid. I put both clues in on purpose. So if you missed one, which that one back there was really quite easy to miss, especially when you don't know what's coming up ahead, the second one was there to save you somewhat. But I'd say that this is the first puzzle that would maybe challenge the average player. I'm probably wrong about that. I'm sure plenty of people dipped out of frustration much earlier on in the game, but for me this was the first one where I was like, I'm not sure about this. This one might be a little tough, especially like partway through the game. I was desperate to finish the game at this point, so it was kind of like, oh, what do I do now? Oh, we've got all these plastic bottles, let's be like, oh, they've been piling up these plastic bottles, look at all these plastic bottles. it's sort of a narrative on the waste and stuff like that, and that is further explained in the sequel for sure. We explain why all these bottles are here and where they've come from. So yeah, this is the start of this puzzle, and it's one of those that's like, haha, it's super easy, you just get out of here, sort of thing, making this room seem like an easy room, I guess. But as you'll see now, that isn't the case. So yeah, at that point I was like, I need to stop putting doors and things and and exploding little bits of platform and that sort of thing, raising bridges. I need to stop it with that sort of thing, because I was essentially running out of ideas on like, well, what's next? A grand piano falls down, you know, and gets in the way. So I thought, well, how about a different thing? Instead, you have something vital taken away from you. And what's happened here is that you've had your floppy disk taken away from you, so you can't use any of the PCs anymore, which means you can't request access. Also, this guy has had his battery taken out of him. If you were looking carefully, you could see that the Shadow Spider had gone this way, out of the room, and a new hole has appeared. So I'm thinking, is this the box room? Yes, this is the box room. Yeah, it took ages to script that stuff. It took absolutely ages to script that stuff, you know, and that was one of the things that convinced me to make my scripting language and the way it handled choices much better, because yeah, that was a little tough. So we've got these doors here. This is essentially a really lazy maze puzzle, essentially. And if you just take a random door and then another random door. So basically we've gotten that wrong, so it'll dump us out here. We go along, and we're back at the doors again. I think eventually a lot of people just go 1, 2, 3, 4. And in here there's a note basically saying, nice try but do it in reverse. So that was like the second clue I put in to sort of like, well, if you've figured out that you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, then you're nearly there. I may as well put in a clue for the reverse, especially since the only other visual clue is kind of nebulous. You notice there's these flashing like symbols on the wall. Now I appropriated them from something, I forget what, and I'll put it down in the description when I remember. It's like some sort of like number system, and I'm pretty sure like some old culture used it. I think I will find out which one, because I'm not entirely sure, but yes, I definitely appropriated that idea from somewhere. I thought we need to number these doors, but I didn't want to actually put numbers on the top. So when I found this, I was like, oh, this is really cool, because it's like kind of alien to most English speakers, I imagine. Perhaps alien wasn't the right word, it's just not known by many English speakers. So it just felt like a cool vibe, I guess. So that flashing little blob up there, that is the third clue for this puzzle, and that's like the symbol of the door that you're looking for. Of course, if you've been paying attention by now, that the solution is 4, 3, 2, 1, and it'll always be 4, 3, 2, 1. This isn't like it has no RNG sort of dictating this. So now we get our floppy disk back. I don't think there's anything interesting on that terminal, I could be wrong. You'll have to play the game and find out for yourself. Oh, there was something interesting on that terminal. I just forgot there was a little note that was essentially like from the shadow guy. It was from the shadow spider, and it was expressing fear of the player character, which is you, the purple guy. So we'll get the grabber. Now, this animation plays out so long from what I recall, so we'll just get the right one to begin with. It's crate 3 that you're after, I think. I hope I've remembered that right. This bit was a little bit inspired from, I think, Doom 3 has like a section where you're using a grabber. And I was like, oh, that's shit enough to be in my game. Cool, so we've got the battery, so we are ready to go with the robot. So this is where the game was getting a little longer than I expected, and at this point I was thinking, where is this going? We've done the whole bottles thing, which was kind of cool, but where do we go from there? How do we wrap it up? And I intended this sort of like next level to be the last, but it wasn't, as you'll see. So I'll request access. It's the bottle reappears in the robot's hand. Like just these little details that I wasn't doing that I definitely do now. I've never seen the robots move diagonally as well. Well, I wasn't expecting that. I didn't think my NPCs could move diagonally. Okay. So this was sort of intended to be the last puzzle. Pretty much, it's a longer one, I guess you could say. We'll go down the lift first, because that's what you're meant to do. So this puzzle came, at least the beginning of this puzzle came entirely from wanting my rain effect to be used in the game, and that is it. I was like, I've got all these weather effects and I haven't used them. There's a storm one which does little flashes of lightning and plays like a thunder sound, and I haven't used any of that. So I thought, well, we'll use the rain one and we'll sort of make a puzzle out of it. I think what Xander did with the sound here is really cool, the way it sort of like flows from one to another pretty well. So yeah, I just wanted to be able to use that and be like, look, weather. It doesn't make much sense, but here it is, in this room only. So this is where it kind of branches out. Not really. There's a choice coming up, and depending on what you choose depends on how you complete the rest of this puzzle. I said that all backwards. But yeah, there's the micro pay shop, and you've got the choice of the web, the sword, or the cookies. And you can only pick one of these, and there's a different way to solve the puzzle depending on which one you've picked. And this was intended to sort of be like the final bit. It didn't really work out that way though, and I'll explain that after I've gone through it. What we will do is, you know what, we'll get the web. Why not? But yeah, this was my first effort to wrap up the game and be like, right, we're coming to an end here. I'm getting bored of making this. The pandemic's coming to an end. I need to start working on better games. Oh, what's through here? Oh, it's this room again, of course. I don't think you can grab that, can you? A lot of these unexplained elements do reappear in Spiderbro 2 with a lot more context. I've tried to really flesh out this universe as such and explain what on earth is going on in the context of this game. I've tried to do it in a way that means you don't have to play the first Spiderbro if you don't want to as well, because I can appreciate it may be a little bit of a boring slog for some. So the first final boss battle, before it didn't become the final boss battle, was the giant trash fish. Originally, depending on which item you picked, you get a different ending. Now this was kind of weak and mediocre, all things considered. It originally went, you could either save yourself, save the Spiderbro, or save both of you, depending entirely on this arbitrary choice that you picked early on which item that you'd gotten. So, and you can't go back and exchange it. So yeah, this was like a really weak effort to introduce multiple endings, and I'm glad it didn't work out, because a lot of people played the game early on, was, you know, the people I encouraged to test this. A lot of them felt underwhelmed by the ending, and some, I think even Xander was just straight up confused and was just like, I do not understand what just happened. So yeah, ultimately I decided to add an extra ending. Sort of scrap the whole 3 possible endings scenario and go for just one ending and one big ultimate puzzle surrounding that ending. I'd had a bit of time away from the game, I think, at that point, because Xander was doing a lot of the sound work at this point, and yeah, I think that helped, just being able to step back and just come up with a new idea. Okay, we have more web. So we've opted to save the Shadow Spider. The Shadow Spider saves himself if you can't save him now, simply because he's needed for the last puzzle. I think the second ending is definitely so much better. It adds a lot more intrigue, and it brings it to sort of like a definite close, and not just this confusing, what happened? Oh god, this is so slow. Yes, it's so slow, my goodness. I think this was, at this point, a deliberate choice. I wanted to, because I earlier sort of hinted that this shadow guy wasn't a bad guy, in fact he was running scared from you, and that's why he's putting up all these barriers and obstacles and stuff like that. So I decided at this point he's becoming tired and he's just losing the will, and he's just like just continuously just trying to slowly get away. So save the game here. Pretty sure that's the final save point. So this final puzzle, it's an indefinite loopy thing, and I'm sure it confused a lot of the people who aren't particularly good at adventure puzzle games. Especially since some elements are really quite nebulous and weird. I'm just going to show you how to complete the puzzle, simply because I can't be asked getting it wrong, to be honest. I do understand people's frustration and impatience with this part of the game. With that said, for those who do like adventure puzzle games enough to be sort of veterans and really good at these games, this was often the only puzzle they actually liked in the game. Oh god, I've got no way to skip this. What have I done? Right, so we'll take from this first. The idea of this puzzle is to fix those two fans that were in the other room a little while back. Oh god, I forgot about this. Oh my god. I'm so sorry I released this onto people. I'm so sorry. My next game is going to be a lot better, I promise. So yeah, you've got to fix the fans through various means, and then you've got to put sort of like a reflect drop in that little hole. You see, it's in the little hole in the centre of the room there, that little circle. And then make sure that the shadow spider can't escape this room, so he's trapped in with you. And that's the fundamentals of this puzzle. Fix the fans, fill the hole with the reflect drop, and make sure the shadow spider can't leave the room, because if the shadow spider can leave the room, then it can also reset the puzzle, which may be the bit that frustrated a lot of people. From what I remember, it's easier to do it this way instead of going round in a circle continuously. It's slightly quicker. There's a pro tip for the speedrunners. I'm sure speedrunners would absolutely hate this game. I'm not sure. Unless they found a way to totally break it, in which case that would totally break my heart, because, oh no, they've broken my game. They've been playing it for 15 minutes. Oh god, yeah, this bit is so slow. You know, I was prepared to say positive things about this ending, but now I am just impatient. Okay, cool. So there's more work to be done on the fans. They all now need lubricating, so... Oh yeah. The neighbours are arguing. hear them shouting. Okay, so we now fill this bottle with lubricant. So you'll be pleased to know that there are very few frustrating bits in Spiderbro 2, I'd like to think. Maybe one or two for the pros, but it won't be as slow and as dull as this game for the most part. In fact, I'd like to think I've done nothing but try to inject excitement into it, I hope. Okay, so we've got to get more lubricant because you can only get one shot in a bottle apparently. Yada 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 yada. Okay, and the final thing, I think, or one of the final things, is to get the reflect drop. How I was saying that this is the better ending, I'm not too sure. I think narratively it's the better ending. What happens makes a lot more sense. I think the puzzle was probably frustrating for beginners though, and has way too many reset states. You know, you've been seeing me do this in a very intricate order to make sure it doesn't reset, because it's very easy to get the puzzle to reset and then you are having to re-lubricate things or refix things or re-pick things up, sort of thing. Also, whilst you know the shadow guy, whenever you walk into a room he's in, he'll slowly walk out the room. Okay, so I'm pretty certain it'll be okay for me to close this barrier now. That means that the shadow spider cannot technically enter this room, so it'll go in there, it'll hit the barrier, and they'll start coming back in. Oh yeah. So we can check if it's all fully set up. Yeah, ready to start. Ready to start. Awesome. Time to power those fans on. That was my best effort at wind. I've learnt a lot on, mainly on what not to try animating. Wind's one of them. Spiderbro 2, spoilers. One of the enemies is a giant worm, and I thought, oh, that'll be super simple. It'll be so easy to draw a worm, and it is super easy to draw a worm. Animating a worm to make it look convincing that it's moving, a totally different story. Okay, let's complete this game. So if you haven't got this set up right, there's a few things that can happen. The shadow spider can reset the puzzle with the grey switch there that you're actually unable to pull. I know you've not seen me use it, but you can't actually use it. There's also the you haven't put the reflect drop in, so when the fans sort of blow you together, you just sort of bounce off each other. And then there's this actual ending of you both. Essentially, the mirror comes back and you are one again. And that seemed like a somewhat adequate ending that rounded it up a lot better than just saving the guy or not saving the guy or whatever. So that's the end of the game. I didn't credit anyone for the art. It's a stretch to call this stuff art, but if you're wondering, it was all me, sadly, and it's all going to be me in Spiderbro 2 as well, but hopefully I've gotten a lot better. And in Game 3, professional artists who actually know what they're doing, so I can focus on the game and the code and everything that makes it good there. So, thank you for watching.